Good evening, everyone. I think it's time to begin. I want to take a moment to welcome all of you on behalf of the Atlantic Institute of South Carolina and their partner for this event, the Unity Church of Greenville. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you this evening. My name is Brian Bibb. I am a professor in the religion department at Furman University, and I'm very pleased to be here to moderate the panel this evening. And my moderation depends not so much on expertise in the subject as much as my expertise in managing small group discussions among fractious students and people with strong feelings on controversial topics. So I'm hoping to dig deep on that experience. We are very glad to be joined this evening by a distinguished group of panelists from a very wide range of religious-related traditions in the upstate and in Greenville, and I'll just introduce their names here and then we can get right in. Representing secular humanism, we have Kathy Jaggers. Christian Science, Joel Sprague. The Unity Church of Greenville, Reverend James King. Holy Cross Episcopal in Simpsonville, Father Mike Flanagan. Congregation Beth Israel, Rabbi Matthew Marco. Greenville Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, Steve Compton. Our Muslim representative, Fariha Kazi. Our pluralism representative, Raj Gavula. And our Baha'i representative, Tracy Kabali. And we are waiting on our Baptist to show up. It's really unfortunate. It's so hard to find a Baptist in Greenville, South Carolina. When the one we have is not here, then we're, what are you going to do? There's so few. The topic for this evening is peace. And I wanted to start just with one note about definition. I think one of the things we will see is that the concept of peace is something that is very multivalent. It has lots of different meanings depending on the specific situation that we're discussing. I think one of the major divisions of the definition has to do with, are we thinking about more individual or personal or internal notions of peace, or are we thinking more about social, connected, external, corporate definitions of peace? And when my area of research is the Hebrew Bible, and when I was putting together my notes for this evening, a couple of passages from the prophets occurred to me, and I wanted to read a couple of things very quickly.
Are you going to burn my material right now?
Just do it in Hebrew. You
can do that too.
I know Marcus Hebrew is a lot better than that. This is the prophet Zechariah. These are the things you shall do. Speak the truth to one another. Render in your courts judgments that are true and that make for peace. Do not devise evil in your hearts against one another, and love no falseness. For all these things are the things that I hate, says the Lord. And I was interested in the way that here peace is defined not positively, but more negatively as the opposite of falsehood, as the opposite of lying, false representation, as the opposite of the things that lead to division and injustice. And so I think a passage like that is kind of interesting, but then we also have passages that are more frightening to me. For example, in Micah talks about those religious leaders who are very interested in peace, and they cry, peace, peace, peace. But they have something to eat, and they declare war against those who have nothing to put in their mouths. And for those people, God says, it shall be night without vision, and darkness without revelation. And so we see, I think the topic is one that is not only relevant and timely, but incredibly important in the sense that it gets at the heart of the things that tie us together as a human community and the things that threaten to tear us apart. And so I'm very excited to be part of this conversation this evening and the desire to create lines of dialogue and conversation among people from various traditions to find ways toward truth, ways toward justice in the world in which we live. And so I want to thank our panelists again for being with us. And to get started, we're going to just go down the line, and I'm going to give each person a minute or two to introduce themselves and their religious tradition, to say something about what they consider their core beliefs and the core tenets of their faith, and the thing that has brought them to that point in their life. And then from there, we have a couple of questions, and it will be more of a free-for-all conversation after that. So we'll start here with Kathy, and you can pass the microphone down.
Thank you. It's really good to be here. I'm always grateful when I can get a chance to talk to people about humanism, because a lot of folks simply understand that humanism equals atheism, and atheism is kind of this word that makes everybody cringe. And I don't want that to happen, because humanism is so much more than just not believing in a supernatural God. I'm going to read this from the Humanist Manifesto, the third version of that. Humanism is a progressive philosophy of life that, without supernaturalism, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. And that, of course, includes peace.
Good evening, my name is Joel Sprague, and I'm a student of Christian Science. Christian Science is a small little Christian denomination that was founded by Mary Baker Eddy back in the 1800s. And I would have to say that Christian Science is kind of does a special focus on the healing ministry of Christ Jesus. And kind of the effort is to delve in and find what were those laws of God that Jesus was relying on in his ministry, in his healing, in his demonstration. And those laws of God, or divine science, or Christian science, are what the scope, the focus of Christian science is.
I'm James King. It's really good to be here tonight with you all. And I only have a minute, so I wrote it down, as we were discussing earlier. The unity is a safe haven where people are allowed to explore their own spirituality without judgment. Our doctrinal statement very well could be the Sermon on the Mount. We practice the teaching of Jesus and the universal principles found in the Bible and other sacred texts. We believe that all people have value and worth, and that every person has the right to express the spark of divinity that is within them. As a movement, we are not against anyone, but rather our goal is to empower people to make the changes in their own lives through the one power, the one presence that we call God. We believe that the Creator has made the diversity we see in the world, so our purpose is to learn from it and to enjoy it. So, in a nutshell, unity.
I'm Mike Flanagan. I'm an Episcopalian. The Episcopal Church is historically related to the Church of England. The name Episcopal refers to the ancient threefold ministry of bishops, priests, and deacons. And we are Christian and Trinitarian and sacramental in nature, similar to the Roman Catholic Church, but our polity is much more democratic. We elect bishops, we elect priests, we gather every 3 years as a body to deal with the policies, the ministries, and the structure of the church. We are fortunate enough to be the second largest governing body in the world, only behind India. Their folks are bigger than us. We gather, there's about 900 of us that gather once every 3 years. It's a little unwieldy sometimes. But anyway, we're working on that. I personally am a former Roman Catholic and became an Episcopalian before marrying my wife in 1982. The Episcopal Church was familiar to me, and I realized as a married man, I could still answer a call to ordained ministry. So I can have my cake and eat it too. Our church is open and progressive, and that's what appeals to me while not letting go of the ancient traditions of the sacraments and liturgy.
I'm Kyle Matthews. I'm a friend of Mike's. I'm so glad to be here. I almost didn't make it because on my way to a discussion about peace, I got stuck in the parking lot behind two people coming to blows over a single parking spot. And I thought, in our tradition, we call that irony. My name is Kyle Matthews. I'm one of several ministers at First Baptist Greenville. I understand Baptists have already been the subject of some jokes, which is perfectly appropriate. Baptists are a free church tradition historically, which means that the autonomy of the local church is respected, the autonomy of the local believer, the personal believer to make their own decisions. And of course, that's just an opportunity for conflict. When you allow people the freedom to do that. And we've had our share historically. We were part of the Southern Baptist Convention, which at one time was the largest Christian Protestant denomination in the world. And through conflict over who's going to be in control, and over who's going to interpret Scripture for everybody else, and over who's going to be included, that denomination has been broken into a lot of small pieces. First Baptist Greenville is allied with the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship and the Alliance of Baptists. And you can tell from those two words right there, the aspiration of our congregation is to be cooperative and to be allied so that we can allow for as much diversity as possible. Those divisions that have made us stand apart have to do with divisions over race, over women in leadership, and over other kinds of inclusion that other folks were not ready for, and the desire to allow every person to be on their own journey of interpretation, their own understanding. And so we try to honor that diversity. We're not, we say this a lot, we're not typical kind of Baptists. I can answer more questions.
Can you hear over the party next door?
Sort of, just be a little louder.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm heard. My name is Matthew Marco, and I'm the rabbi at Congregation Beth Israel. Judaism, like the other great monotheistic religions, believes in one God who is the creator of everything. But Judaism is not so much a created religion that you have to believe in something. It's more of a religion of ethics and behavior. And one big key to understanding ourselves and our role in the world is the notion of being created in God's image, to be created in the image and likeness of God. So since we're all created in God's image, any act of violence against another person is in fact a direct act of violence against God, because we're all the face of God. It also means that God chose us to be partners in the ongoing work of creation. We call it tikkun olam, which means perfecting the world or just making the world a better place to live, and that's part of our sacred charge. The Hebrew word for peace is shalom. People have heard that, but the root is very similar, I believe, to my Muslim brothers and sisters of salam. It means complete. It means wholeness. Is it the same in Arabic?
Salam is like peace.
Peace. Well, it means peace, but the root in Hebrew is actually from a wholeness and a completeness. The customary Jewish greeting when we meet one another is Shalom Aleichem, which is the same as Salam Aleikum, and the response is Aleichem Shalom, peace upon you, peace. Jewish religious texts overwhelmingly endorse compassion and peace. The Hebrew Bible gave the world the well-known commandment, V'ahavta yarecha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. The Torah also commands 36 times more than any other to be kind to the stranger. In terms of peace, every single Jewish prayer, every prayer service, every one ends with Oseh Shalom ben Romav, may the one who creates peace on high bring peace to us, to all of Israel, and to all who dwell upon the earth. And remember, it was a Hebrew prophet named Isaiah who envisions a time when they will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, and nation will not take up sword against nation, and no one will again know war. May that come very speedily in our time.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm Steve Compton. I grew up here in Greenville as a Wesleyan Methodist. I went to Furman University, and for many years I wandered in the theological wilderness, crossing over the River Jordan metaphorically. I came to the Unitarian Universalist faith in 1995 in Charleston, South Carolina, where one of the oldest Unitarian churches in anywhere, certainly in the South, exists, where the cornerstone was laid in 1772. So Unitarian means one God, not Trinitarian. It comes out of the Puritan Congregationalist tradition out of England primarily, brought to this country by the scientist and theologian Joseph Priestley, a great friend of Jefferson and others. Many of the founders, as you probably know, were Unitarians. Another tradition coming out of England brought by James Murray. I turned it off. What did I do? Here it comes. Is it back on again? Thank you very much. Reverend James Murray brought over Universalism, which is why I changed the sign from this to this to reflect both of our unified traditions. That simply means that God, in his view and in Universalism's view, God is too good to send anybody to hell. There is no hell. Good news, there is no hell. That's the message of Universalism. We all have the possibility of salvation. In 1961, the two traditions joined together formally to form the UUA, and that's what we have today. Now, here in Greenville, South Carolina, a group of liberal folks led by the journalist Gil Rowland, Greenville News fellow, were meeting together about segregation and social justice and discovered that they might in fact be Unitarians and founded the Greenville Fellowship in 1950. And we've been there ever since. We moved buildings, but we never moved our faith in social justice and peace. And that's who we are. We work very hard. We're the second largest UU congregation in South Carolina, 385 strong, 2 million across the country. Not huge, but significant. And you will find us oftentimes wearing this yellow t-shirt or sweatshirt in the front, in the midst of just about every social justice movement, protest, anytime when there's something going on to change the world. We are very proud to be among many of the rest of you as well in that forefront. That's who we are.
Good evening. My name is Raj Gavrila, and to me, being a pluralist is simply I was born through Hindu parents. So my spiritual foundation is Hinduism. Now, as I've grown, I've learned, and what I believe is that all religions, or each religion, so how I became my faith, as far as, to me, faith is individual, whereas religion is more a collective description of a group of people who have similar beliefs. And so, therefore, through my interactions with people of different faiths, through my study of world religions, which I really enjoy doing, I apply that learning to all aspects of my life. And then, of course, I'm always growing my relationship with God and the Holy Spirit.
In the name of God, most beneficent, most merciful, I begin with a greeting of peace. I just learned from Rabbi Mark as well, they have the same greeting, shalom, as we say.
Salam.
Salam. So can you all say salam? Salam. So this is how we begin a meeting of peace with a greeting of peace. My name is Fariha Qazi, originally from Pakistan. I guess you can guess with my accent. Living in US for 17 years now. I have 3 kids. And I am serving as the president of the Sisters Committee of Islamic Society of Greenville. I'm also a middle school history teacher. I teach US history and world history, and to add to my delight, I was given South Carolina history. So I'm really thrilled and excited to be here. And one thing that I'm looking forward to knocking down is the misconception, misinformation about the faith that I take pride in, which is being associated with something it was sent to end in the world. And that is terrorism, warfare, fighting, restlessness, turmoil. Islam was sent to end all of that. So I look forward to our discussion on peace. I look forward to presenting the actual pure vision of Islam. And I just want to say that if you want to get the actual pure vision of Islam, see Islam not through the actions of the Muslims, but from the original scripture. And also, turn the Fox News off. So I'm just excited to be here, and I think my minute is over.
Very good.
Good evening. My name is Tracy Cavalli. I'm a Baha'i here in upstate area. I actually live in Spartanburg County in the city of Greer. I grew up in upstate area. I grew up in Spartanburg. I've been a Baha'i for many years. The thing about the Baha'i faith is the premise of the Baha'i faith is unity, to establish unity in the world today. We want to establish peace in the world. We have a system in which the founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, left us to do that. And we are working minute by minute and day by day trying to establish peace everywhere. We see it here in Greenville, Spartanburg area. It's being established in places like India, Africa, and everywhere I go, I see those things already in place. But it has to start with us in our own communities, in our own families. I'd like to read something that Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, wrote. He said, the well-being of mankind, Baha'u'llah wrote, more than a century ago, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. So that's what Baha'is do. That's what we're working on to do, and we're working diligently every day to do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And at this point, we're going to transition to a little bit more of unstructured conversation. I'm going to give you a question, and I'm going to ask if you will be sensitive to each other and try to have a little bit of awareness of getting everyone involved and asking each other questions. I think the more conversational it is, the more interesting it'll be to everyone, and maybe we can get through to something interesting and surprising. And so I want to ask the question. We'll just raise hands, and we'll try to cooperate together to pass the mic and just go from there. So the first question, which you've already touched on, and then we'll go from there into others, is how would you say that your faith tradition or religious tradition or ethical tradition is working to create peace in the world, specifically?
In 2008, a UU church in Knoxville was attacked by a man with a shotgun. 2 were killed, 7 were wounded, and he very explicitly, he lived through the attack and is now serving time. He said he went there to kill liberals who were giving him and the world a very hard time. The shirt I'm wearing, standing on the side of love, is an explicit response to violence. We answer violence with love. We put ourselves in positions where we do not answer that kind of violence with violence. We believe love and understanding, trying to learn about other faiths and other people is absolutely essential, and we really practice that. We have a very explicit class that we have in compassionate communication, many of us have taken part in. And we believe in listening and understanding other faiths. Our faith itself draws from many different traditions, and we have many different traditions come. And in our pulpit, Rabbi Marco, sitting next to me, has been in our pulpit. People from First Baptist, from the Muslim faith have come. All kinds of different faiths come to our pulpit. We think ignorance and fear is the main cause of violence, and peace, therefore, will be enhanced by understanding and listening to each other.
Turn the mic on, though.
Did he turn it off again? Oh, I may have turned it off.
For me, working to bring peace first and foremost, but one of the things that I'm always challenged to understand is God gave me a growing family, faith, culture, and identity. And so from there, I see a lot happening in our society where families, people are estranged from their parents or their brothers and sisters, and that's just a very unusual concept or occurrence for me to relate to, because that's like number one for me is family and being a humanitarian first. And so the next thing would be that we need to see life as sacred. And I talked with a former police officer, a friend of mine. He said, there's young people out there, Raj, that if you give them enough money, they have no problem with going and killing somebody or doing violence. And to me, again, that's something that I cannot comprehend. And then additionally, I think the way to create peace is what I do as a pluralist, and because I do really enjoy learning from people and learning how to learn and learn from each other, is I've really learned how to have or share authentic, honest dialogue with each other about our faith and culture without putting each other on the defensive. And when I have those conversations with people, it is amazing how we both really grow. And I think really that's the purpose of being able to connect with one another. As there's a, in the U.S. history, there's a, I think it's even, it's a e pluribus unum. So of many is one. And so one of the misconceptions of some of the, especially Hinduism, is that there's so many gods. Well, really, it's one God who has many forms, and then, of course, the Holy Spirit.
I just want to add to Raj's point on every life is sacred, and I wanted to emphasize that a life lost to hate in Las Vegas is as sacred as life lost to hate in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. A leader inciting hate is as distributable in America or any other part of the world. So we have to realize that. And when we choose our fights, we have to decide that it should be universal. We're looking for universal peace. And we also have to realize that as Muslims, we have been harmed, dishonored, more of us than any other non-Muslim, by those people who have hijacked our religion. Islam means submission to God. And in that, we find peace. The 6th century Arabia was a war-torn country. Female infanticide was rampant. In that backdrop, Prophet Muhammad elevated the status of the woman, made mothers the doors to paradise, daughters as ways to paradise, wives as half of faith, and brought Arabia under total peace. Under Islamic empire, peace would spread. So Islam actually says that all minorities and women, not only white males, should enjoy superiority in the community. So Islam brings equality, talks about racial discrimination, and wants to see, as Professor Dick was talking about, not only internal peace, but also social peace. So if Islam does sanction war, I will not, dispute about that, but the war is there to eradicate the elements of evil, and after you eliminate those elements of evil, society at large can live at peace.
I'd just like to mention the Baha'i faith has traditions of which peace will be established. And we are working every minute for that goal. We have such things as children's classes where we teach virtues to children in the upstate here every week. We have programs that teach conflict resolution to youth and adults. We have all these programs in place where people can come, and most of the people involved in these classes and seminars and things are not Baha'is. We feel like that if we are to attain world peace, it has to include everybody, not just Baha'is or not just a certain group of people. You have to include everybody from every social and economic situation, from every race, culture, and that's one of the things the Baha'i faith emphasizes. Our principles are the elimination of all prejudice, equality for men and women, universal education. So those things have been established in the Baha'i faith for more than 200 years. We do work toward those goals on a daily basis.
Let's pass it down this way.
On the humanist side of things, humanists recognize, as probably we all do, but humanists recognize that war and peace and war and violence are human problems. And wars are started by human beings, and they can only be stopped by human beings. So throughout history, humanists have long believed that things needed to be taken care of by words and not arms. And that's a quotation from Lucretius way back when. And that genuine peace is more than just the absence of war between nations. Genuine peace has to come when we have tolerance between communities, we have respect between individuals, and ultimately peace and harmony within the human heart. And I didn't know this until I did some research, but many of the founders of the United Nations were humanists. The most well-known of them is Eleanor Roosevelt. So, humanism and that particular slant on things has been active doing peace things since ancient times.
And there's one place where, and maybe the only place where Christian Science kind of punches above its weight class is with the Christian Science Monitor, which the founder of Christian Science, when she was 85, she had been blistered and seen the world blistered by yellow journalism, and said, we just need some way for individuals to learn the real information. Then they can make their own decisions. And I think that's, as I was listening to some of the comments here, I think how contributory that may very well be from the Christian Science standpoint to the world's goal of peace. Let us all just hear what's really going on without some particular slant, and then let us think about it. And when we do think about it, very often we can come to a good, peaceful conclusion.
Absolutely. This idea of creating peace in the world, I think it's important to have a vision of the world that you want to see. A world that works for everyone, where everyone can have a piece of the pie, so to speak. And so, to me, there's a scripture that you see in the New Testament at just about every ball game. It says, for God so loved the world. And so you just think about that. Think about that idea that whatever your conception or your perspective of God is, then it would have to be bent toward the positive in some way. Because we live in a world where there is actually more positive than there is negative, as long as you don't watch the news and you experience that. And so I believe that the world is full of potentialities, full of possibilities. And I feel like that it's not our job to judge people in the world, but to learn how to be with people in the world. learn how to be with them in a way that makes sense, just basic common sense. Jesus talked about loving your enemies and loving your neighbor, as you love yourself, and loving God. And so there's a lot of love, being thrown around. And so what is your definition of love? What is your mission, your personal mission? What is the mission that you have in life? And I think one of the things that we can do is if we can work toward the end of suffering, helping to alleviate human suffering in whatever way, shape, or form that we can do that, then I believe that we are fulfilling whatever good that we have in us, and that by doing that we are helping to bring about a healing to the world, which is what the world needs. We need less duality, we need less anger and resentment and bitterness, and we need more people who are actually practicing their principles of kindness and cooperation and working together. And so, to me, we can have a harmonious world if we want to, but we have to have the right focus. We have to see the world from a different space, from a higher perspective. And in doing that, then we have more faith and confidence. Many times when you watch the news, it just zaps all of the energy out of your body. And you feel powerless, and you feel like, there's nothing I can do. But there is something that each one of us can do. We can help our neighbors. We can reach out beyond ourselves and do that thing that we are here to do. By doing that, then all of us together, then it makes a difference.
We could have just gone more of a...
We should have. The Episcopal Church, I think, is late to the table when it comes to peace. I believe it's kind of, if I have to really be honest about our history, historically, we started in the midst of the Protestant Revolution. We spent a lot of time killing each other between the Catholics and the Protestants, putting people on the stake and all that stuff. And then we came to America and we decided that we were going to break away from the Church of England, and that was quite a row as well. For me, my favorite story is the story of Paul Jones, Bishop of Utah, who during World War I stated publicly that he believed that war was unchristian. And there were a lot of people who supported him. However, the House of Bishops got together and discussed his statement and said, we want you either to recant or to resign your see as Bishop of Utah. And after about a year of mulling it over, Bishop Jones resigned his see as Bishop of Utah. And then he started the Episcopal Pacifist Fellowship, which became the Episcopal Peace Fellowship. And now, I smile because now he's in our book of what's called Lesser Feasts and Fasts, and he's considered a saint of the church. We grow.
You have to die to get appreciated.
There you go. You do.
I think I just wanted to answer the question as clearly as I did about what are we doing, and I want to tell you what First Baptist is doing. There are basically two things that we talk a lot about. One of them is to facilitate peace in the world. We do a lot of outward things. So we are travelers. We're always going somewhere or having someone come to us. We have partnerships around the world, and we try to show up and shut up and listen and allow there to be a diversity of voices in our community. If you come during what's been called Black History Month, we're going to call it Black History, Black Future Month. You'll hear a different African American voice in our pulpit each week. We're trying our best to be people who listen first. And by the way, that's a great new website that some college students have started. It's non-religious, but it speaks to everything I've heard. Listen First is a great new student-led website where all they're asking people to do is listen first. And I love everything I'm hearing today, and I hope you all would know you're welcome to First Baptist. So we do these. There's a thing called the Baptist Peace Fellowship where they have classes. They send people around the world. They teach children. I encourage you to look into the Baptist Peace work. But we come to recognize that the most essential work we do in peace is the work we do looking inward. And introspection is not the thing most people associate with Baptists, but it is where we're trying to grow. We would say that conflict is part of life, and that avoiding conflict is really a dead-end street, because it's part of life and part of our calling is to meet life on its own terms. So what we're looking at is what happens inside me when I'm in conflict. What is the inner dynamic? St. Francis said, we have more to fear from our enmity than from our enemy. And one of my favorite theologians, Karl Barth, said it even, I think, better. He said, your enemy is whoever tempts you to return evil for evil. But those are things that have to happen inside an individual person. We have to delineate our own sense of the need to survive against whatever issue is on the table or whatever is before us in terms of conflict. We have to be able to delineate and act in terms of the common good and not just act in a state of fear. So we're trying our best to look inward. One of the things that we say a lot at First Baptist is there tends to be a knee-jerk reaction in conflict to think that we either condemn some behavior or we're condoning it, or if we don't condone it, we need to condemn it, that we've got these two options. Those are false choices, because there is also the option of trusting God to be the judge and to walk alongside people for whatever period of the journey we're with them together, and hope that walking along is what facilitates peace among us. Inward and outward, I would say. Who's next?
I had read in the email that there was a certain amount of questions in time that we didn't have to feel that we needed to answer all of them. I can. I can also say yes, 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 yes to pretty much it. And I think part of it is I mean, we're kind of preaching to the choir. Everyone who walked into this room and decided to sit in this panel already, I think, is 90% of the way there. It's getting the rest out there. I heard a lot of this unity talk, and really I think that's, for me also, it's key that our differences are our differences are an illusion. The more we realize that we're exactly the same, because if you think about it, God is everything and everything is God, what we think is so different really isn't. And my friend Keith, the more he and I speak, the more we realize that our faiths are so alike. It's shocking and astounding. We share the sacredness of life. I think everyone at this table believes that life is sacred. Now, in terms of peace, I will say the Jews, well, for 2,000 years, we've been a very, very, very tiny people with very, very little influence to wield. We have had our word, and we've had what we've taught, and we've given the world an awful lot of that. I mentioned before, though, to be in the image of God. A lot of people think, well, okay, so it says in the Bible we are created in God's image. Well, is that a statement of fact? Because does God really have an image? Or is it a call? Is it a charge? Is it a call to action? And I think the Jewish view of it is it is. It's a call to action. God is loving and merciful. God lifts up the downtrodden and releases the bound and feeds the hungry. And if we are to be in the image of God, that's not a given, that's our job, but then we have to start doing all those things. And as many of my colleagues said, when you alleviate that, when you get rid of the want and the need and the pain and the hurt, then you don't have the fear, then you don't have the uncertainty, and then you don't have the anger that lashes out from that. So it's a matter of working from the ground up, and it seems very daunting because the world is a huge place. We have a saying that it's not our responsibility to finish the work, but we are not free to desist from it either. So we do what we can, and hopefully the next people come. We talk about sort of age of Messiah. What is Messiah? Now, obviously, some of my Christian colleagues, you believe the Messiah has come, but he's coming back. We believe he hasn't come, but he will come. So when he gets here, we'll just ask him, have you been? And if he knows what's good for him, he'll say, I don't recall. The notion of Messiah has never been one set dogma in Judaism. It's sometimes it's talked about of, yes, an actual mamash person that will, or messenger of God that will usher in this age, but for the most part, it's tied to our actions and what we do. Every act of gemilut chasidim, every act of loving kindness that we do and we create brings us one step closer to this Messiah, this saving of the world. And that's because we can create it. Is it really an actual coming, or is it time when we as human beings have realized that we've not been brought into being to destroy or to hate, that we've been brought to being to love and to labor and to worship together and to create the world that I think God wants us to live in, and for the most part is going, I made it so clear. What is unclear about love your neighbor as yourself? What is unclear about doing to others as you would have them do unto you? Which, by the way, every religion that I've studied, every single one, and I stopped at about 50 just because I wanted to prove a point, every one that I have found has had that, the same adage in one form or another. We're really good at saying it. We should be a whole lot better at doing it.
Thank you. This is very encouraging, right? I believe everyone in here feels encouraged, and it's very feels good to know that folks from so many different traditions have so much in common in the way that they view these issues. And I would like to push a little bit and ask, well, why is it so hard? What are the things that you think are the obstacles, the things that are really holding us back? For example, some people would say, and perhaps on the panel, some people would say, well, we need less religion in the world. Some people would say we need more religion in the world. And I think that this is that's just one example of where the things that we draw upon as strengths or as resources to promote peace and understanding and reconciliation are used by our brothers and sisters in other places to divide and to create more conflict. And you know, some of you have spoken about the internal divisions or history within your own traditions about how we struggle to decide, well, what is it we really bringing to the table here? So I would like to ask that, like, what makes it so hard? I mean, why is it that everybody else understands things and we're not there
I'm
yet?
gonna let you guys go.
Yes.
And I'm gonna be very, very brief. I don't. Is that on?
Yeah.
I don't think we need more religion in this world. I think we need less dogma in this world. We need less attachment to I'm right, because the people that are so convinced they're right are the most frightening people on the face of the earth, because when you're convinced that you're right, well then necessarily, by definition, everybody else is wrong. And then you're no longer serving God, you're now serving your religion. And I actually learned this, I met with Arakat, the chief negotiator for the Palestinian people a couple of years ago. I met with him in Jerusalem. And he said something that was very profound. He said, when we think God needs our protection, we're kidding ourselves. God doesn't need our protection. We need God's protection. And what happens is our religion gets in the way. We're no longer serving God. We're no longer serving humanity. We're serving our own need to be right and our own need to be correct. And the fact of the matter is God is far vaster than any of us can ever possibly imagine. And we're all just taking our best shot. And I think if we get our head around that we're all just taking our best shot, I think we'll be a little bit kinder to the people next to us.
I'll just say real briefly, one of the great things we've inherited, we don't pretend that we have the keys to peace. We inherited our faith from these folks sitting to my right. It's Jewish tradition, and in the peaceable kingdom image that Isaiah presents, there's a predator and there's a prey animal. These predators and prey animals are able to coexist, but that requires that the predator animal, but that both species submit part of their nature for the greater good of being together. The predator has to submit the nature of violence and of control, which we talked about, and the prey animal has to submit its impulse to run in fear. It has to submit its fear in order for them to stay together. I think the answer to the question of why this is so hard is that the people who have power are unwilling to be vulnerable. The people who are afraid are unable to speak up for themselves. It's a tragedy to me that in the civil rights movement, it was essentially the powerless people who had to speak up. They should have been spoken up for by the Christian community that had a voice at that time. So when the predator can submit its control and the prey can be brave enough to speak, then I think we come occupy the same space. Thank you.
Well, failing the coming of a day the earth stood still scenario, where we have somebody from another world come and say, fix it or else, I don't think that's going to happen. But I think, for me, the real barrier to world peace is the fact that I think we expect billions and billions of people to all of a sudden take up the common good. You know, we expect everybody to say, oh yeah, that's a wonderful idea. Let's just go ahead and do that. And I don't believe world peace is going to be achieved in my lifetime. It certainly isn't. But unless we start laying some groundwork individually for it, it's not going to be achieved in anybody else's lifetime either. Gandhi said, become the change you wish to see. So I think that's kind of what we do. We have to create this island of peace in our own lives. And if enough of us do that, then those islands are going to meet at some point and form a continent. And then we just have to keep reaching out and branching out. But it's so hard to envision that. We want things to happen all at once in vast populations of people, and I don't think it's going to happen like that. So what we can do individually is, I think, what is important for us to do, and not become disillusioned by the fact that, oh my gosh, 10 billion people are going to have to change how they view things. That's not going to work. We have to do it individually, and then it will reach out to other folks.
And I think that's why the world is more peaceful now than it's ever been.
That's it. You can, but.
You probably can. So, yeah, I agree, you know, with what everyone is saying. I think that's fabulous. You know, I don't have to agree with anybody in order to love them. Right? Mother Teresa said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. And I think that real change starts with the individual. You know, real change, real peace comes from within. And when I'm at peace, and I've resolved my own personal conflicts, then I'm going to be a better reconciler. And I think that we have been taught as children, you know, immediately we begin to separate, you know, by age, by color, by economics, and all of these different things. And we teach our children these ideas without realizing what we're saying, what we're teaching them. And I think it's important that we also instill a love for learning, because it's the people who want to learn about others and others' faith traditions, that want to learn about how people in different economic situations, how they act and respond, and what they need. And I think that we need to have more of the bigger picture, you know, which I get back to. But fear is the basis of conflict. Whenever we're in conflict, somebody is afraid of something. And so to resolve the conflict, we have to resolve the fear in ourselves. And so, to me, that's really important. And as we do that, then it's reflected out in the world. And we see more and more peace outside. Because if you've ever played whack-a-mole, you know, if you're trying to get your brother-in-law to agree with you, you're trying to get your spouse to agree with you, you're trying to get different people to believe like you do, and finally you think that you've got it, and then Cousin Ed comes in and says, no, I see it a different way. And so we have to be at peace with ourselves, I think, which is the most important thing. And then we can make peace outwardly.
How many of y'all drove on 385 on the way here? Did you feel peaceful?
There's that. For me, that's part of the problem, is we have a tendency to objectify one another. That guy cut me off. He ceases to be a person and he becomes a thing, an object, and that's where we lose our perspective.
I want to brag about my congregation and my denomination, and also give a compliment to at least one other congregation that's represented here. The Unitarian Universalist Association was the first to give sanction to actually perform a holy union, a marriage ceremony for same-sex couples in this country in Boston a number of years ago when our president, then William Sinkler, performed the ceremony. And that took guts to stand out and say, these people, these two people, deserve just as much respect and support for their love and their family as anyone else. That's the kind of thing that's also going to be required to make peace in the world. Now, I also know of at least one congregation here in Greenville that in more recent times has gone through what I think is a tremendously laudable process, First Baptist of Greenville, under the leadership of your minister, Jim Dan, and our whole team, to bring that congregation to a place where they are now accepting and supportive of same-sex unions, of LGBTQ people. That is tremendous, because when we bring these people, we support them and love them and allow them to have the same kind of support of their families that anyone else has. This brings peace to the world, because people now see them as people, as healthy families, as part of our community, and don't fear them anymore. The people that fear folks like that are the ones who just don't know them, they don't know their families. So I want to thank First Baptist publicly for what they've done. That has been wonderful, and for a Baptist congregation to do that, I think it's just an amazing thing.
So I have a question for all of you. My question is that in an examination center, all of you have given some types of test or exam. At least your driving test, right? Did you feel at peace while giving your test? Did you feel peace while you were in the examination center, or giving your exam, or giving your test? How many of you felt peace at that time? None of us. We as Muslims believe that God has created good and bad. Actually, just like if there is no night, day will lose its meaning. If there is no bad, good will lose its meaning. So God has told us in Quran, in our holy book, that God has created life and death to test you, who's the best in conduct. So no matter how much we want, that nuclear weapon to disappear from Kim Jong-un's table, or the bigger nuclear weapon to disappear, it's not possible. So no matter how desperately we want, bad to just vanish away from the world, it's not possible. And we believe as Muslims that this is a test for us. We are in the examination center being tested, and the examiner is quiet watching us. Sometimes you feel, why is not God helping me? Because when you're being tested, the person who's testing you is quiet, watching you. And we believe that we will be told based on our good deeds. As a teacher, I know, and most of you who have done some sort of teaching know, that what if there are no rewards or consequences? What a classroom will look like if I tell them, guys, do whatever you want to do in the classroom, if there is no consequence. So there is a reward for good deeds, and there is a consequence for a bad deed. What has went wrong is that in an effort to take out religion out of the classrooms, we have thrown away morality as well. We have made laws for traffic. You stop at red light. But there are absolutely no laws when it comes to moral life. Do whatever you want. Prophet Muhammad said, if somebody loses modesty, then he does whatever he wills. There's no limit. You do whatever you want to. So I do believe, I also believe, as Dr. Bibb was saying, It's not religious-minded people or too many religions that are a problem, because all of us sitting over here, we want to see the world as a peaceful place, right? We all agree on that. All of you in audience over here agree on that. It's not the religious-minded people, but are those problematic people who want to use religion for their political gains, and we see that happening over some other goals. So it's important as evil surfaces, the good surfaces as well, to a much stronger degree. And I can tell you this, when God created, according to Islamic traditions, He said, my mercy will prevail over my anger. And God put the strength and truth to prevail as well, and peace to prevail as well, and good to prevail as well, and light to prevail as well. God has given more power to good to prevail, more power to honesty, compassion, truthfulness. And we talk about the common values, love your neighbor. In Islamic traditions, it say, you are not a believer until and unless you wish for your brother what you wish for yourself. Such is the beauty. And I'm sure we have a lot of, on the shared common grounds that we have, we can make this world a better place to live for ourselves and more so for our children and for the generations to come.
I'd like to just mention in the Baha'i faith, there is peace, there is justice. That's something that we haven't really mentioned and we kind of touched on. We have to have justice for all people, whether they are obeying the laws or not obeying the laws. I'd like to read something here from the Baha'i writings. It says, the abolishment of war is not simply a matter of signing treaties and protocol. In essence, peace stems from an inner state supported by a spiritual and moral attitude. It is chiefly invoking these attitudes that the possibility of enduring solutions can be found. I look at, finding peace is kind of like losing weight. We all know what we have to do to lose weight. We got to eat less, and we got to exercise more. We have a framework for peace. We have to, establish certain protocols to bring about peace. And until people get sick and tired of just, sending their children to war and coming back damaged, until we get sick and tired of seeing people suffering from hunger when there's more than enough food on this planet to feed everybody, until we get to that point, we're not going to have peace. But we will eventually have peace. We're going to either have it, if we step up and do the things we need to do, we will attain peace. But if we don't, we're going to have to get it like kicking and screaming, and go through a lot of different things before we attain that peace. But I do believe we will have peace.
Thank you. We have a few minutes left. I thought it might be interesting to entertain a couple of questions from the audience. I think in particular, follow-ups or responses to particular comments that were made. We don't want to, we just see how it goes. So we'll start right here.
Yeah, I'll just, he just mentioned something, and I'll give you sort of food for thought, because I just knew about this today, a couple of hours ago. I didn't know what's it about peace. When she mentioned justice, peace is the result, of the end result of justice. Richard Holbrooke, or Dick Holbrooke, was the negotiator for the Dayton Peace Agreement in the early 90s. When he was asked, and this was engraved in my mind 25 years ago, he said that the agreement between the Serbs and Bosnia and Herzegovina, he said that they told him this is not just peace. He said it may not be just peace, but it's peace anyway. In my mind, I was blown off. I was much younger. He said this is a cessation of hostility. A ceasefire is not peace. If you don't have justice, you can't have peace, because that's the end result of justice. whether you're throwing, apples or, Brazil, dumping coffee because of the price, and people need this somewhere else, this is not peace. One of the panelists mentioned Franciscan. 2-3 weeks ago, I saw on PBS South Carolina a documentary, The King and the Saint, about St. Francis, the Franciscan. The Pope sent the Crusaders to Egypt. I'm originally from Egypt. I've been here 33, 34 years. I was blown off by that fact. They were in a city called Damyat or Damata. And people can Google that and can go to the South Carolina. That king, the Egyptian, basically the nephew of Salah ad-Din, if you know who Salah ad-Din is, and he beat the Crusaders in Jerusalem. His nephew became the king of Egypt. St. Francis went across, war lines, despite the Pope problem, encouraging the fight. The Crusaders that were in this city, and I said, I never knew that. I knew Napoleon was beaten in Mansoura, it's another city in Egypt, and his people. But the Crusaders in that city, they were sort of becoming victorious. Rain happened, they were stuck in mud. They were going to die. The king in Egypt, and I saw that 2-3 weeks ago, at 2 a.m. He basically did an act, never knew that. I'm almost 60. He sent them 100 loaves of bread every day, his enemies. And he sent them, I don't know how many cows. They ended up withdrawing, and this can create peace.
Thank you.
If you have justice, you can have peace.
Does anybody have a comment about the problem of justice? I mean, I do think sometimes cessation of hostility looks like peace, but does sow the seeds for further hostility. Anybody have a response to that?
You said something very interesting, and I think there's a slight difference in our theologies. I believe in normative Jewish thought, God does not create evil at all. God creates everything. God creates goodness. Yes, darkness is the absence of light, and evil is simply the absence of good. It's not a thing in and of itself, at least in Jewish thought. What God did create us with is with free will, is with choice. And we also don't believe that anyone is born evil. We were born with inclinations. As we're very young, we're born with the Yetzer Hara. This is so the self-serving inclinations, and anybody who sees a baby, me, I, knows that that's a very fully and well-developed inclination right from birth. And it takes time for us to develop our more altruistic, our Yetzer Tov, our more altruistic inclinations. It isn't, if you can create that justice in sort of taking your own ego, your own me, out of the way, that's when you can start creating justice. And yes, there will never be peace until there's justice, but at the same time, we have an expression that a bad peace is better than a good war. So it's definitely a step in the right direction, but it's definitely a matter of somehow taking yourself, your ego out of it and looking at the big picture. And there is an expression, and it's from Golda Meir, and I will say she said back in the 60s, until they love their children more than they hate ours, we will not have peace. And that is true for any group that is in conflict. Until you decide you love your people more than you hate theirs, you're not gonna meet. And everybody has wants, everybody has needs, but they have to meet somewhere in the middle, and that's the nature of compromise. I have to be willing to scale back what I think is mine, so there's room for you to have what you think is yours, and you have to be willing to do the same thing. And then it's possible. It's possible. It's right there. And every time it doesn't happen, it's heartbreaking. But it's possible. We got to keep trying.
My name's Susie Smith. One of the unresolved issues in our community, in our nation right now, is undocumented workers and immigrants. I've been working for a year to find a community, a religious community, that would take in undocumented people to protect them from being arrested, deported, detained by ICE. Every congregation has turned me down. Is there any way any of you would reconsider that in light of what you've said tonight?
I know that's been an open discussion at First Baptist. I don't know
It's
the
been
latest.
raised at
But
First Baptist.
I understood that we were in the midst of dealing with that, and that we had we had legal issues to deal with, that our hands were tied to a certain degree. But there's a committee at work on that, and I think we'd be happy to talk to you about it. I can't speak to it because I'm not up to
been
that.
told that it was closed by First Baptist.
Well, I wish I could tell you more. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. I know that's something that we have talked at length and openly about and would love to do. I think there are reasons, but I don't know, I can't articulate what they are right now. But please, let's continue that discussion.
Thank you.
My name is Marie Marco. So I tend to lean towards anger, and especially lately. So one of the things that I try to do is get from anger to peace myself in the shortest possible distance. But I don't. Injustice is usually how that happens. As somebody said here, you go from anger to justice to peace. And in the absence of justice, how can we create peace if there is no justice? Because there may not be justice if somebody says that I'm not allowed to circumcise my son, or you're not allowed to marry my daughter, or you know what I mean, whatever. That we have differences on how we build communities and countries and cultures, and we have differences on how we enact war. And right now, all I hear is just anger and pilfering of sensible discussion, and it's each one for themselves. And I'm looking for faith leaders, and I don't see enough faith or secular leaders doing that. And so I'm still angry, and I want to know, how can we get to real peace, even if it's not about bombs and stuff, borders? And how can we address anger to get to peace without justice?
She doesn't listen to me, so I'm not
In my other life, I'm a social worker, a psychotherapist, and I teach anger management. That's the truth. I've taught anger management to individuals and groups since 1982. I worked in a prison for 12 years and taught domestic violence perpetrators anger management skills. So I have some experience with this. And I will tell you that, in my opinion, the serenity prayer is a good starting point. If you can do something about it, and it's on your conscience that you can do something about it, then you must do so. There's many things that we must accept, like 385 is going to be a mess, and it doesn't make sense to get into a conflict with individual anonymous people driving other machines, and let that go. If the rain and the cold bother you, let that go. But do not ever let injustice go. If you can do something about it, you must. And peace comes then for me in that process. We must identify and continue to work with other brothers and sisters on these issues. And as long as we are doing that, then we can go to sleep at night and say, I did it today, tomorrow I will pick it up again. And we must continue to work for that, because this world has, as somebody said, enough for everybody not to be one. There should never be one child go to bed lonely, scared, and hungry on this planet. That is unacceptable. And as long as that happens, we need to continue to work toward that end. But I have peace in my heart some of the time when I know that I have done my best to correct that situation. Thank you for your question.
Beth.
May I ask, who made the reference to the civil rights movement and that we should have stood up then? In our current climate, where day after day there is situation after situation where we should be standing up as Christians, we are put together as a whole as a judgmental and unaccepting, and it's so frustrating to me, because in telling someone that I'm a Christian, their first response is, okay, are you Southern Baptist? And I'm so far from that, but Jesus to me is very real. And in a religion where we specifically say, blessed are the peacemakers, we are some of the most divisive. Why aren't we standing up?
Well, I think I'd have to get very specific. I guess if you're addressing that to me, we're making eye contact, but
You guys seem
don't
like the most progressive. I didn't even realize that we had a progressive church that was Baptist here in Greenville.
We went for about 40 years thinking that because we had women deacons, we were progressive. And it took us about a generation to realize that's old news. So we're catching up. But we're pretty isolated, and we've taken a lot of heat. We've had a lot of hate mail, a lot of protests, just a lot of threats. We are not unique among our Cooperative Baptist and Alliance Baptist brothers and sisters. We're just unique in Greenville, South Carolina. And I would encourage you to, if you could get specific with me about those things upon which you'd like to stand up, I probably can connect you with some folks who are doing that very thing. And maybe they're not in our tradition, but I would imagine there's somebody who cares from our tradition. I will say something because this relates to the anger as well. And both of you have raised a question that has been on my mind. I will just go ahead and tell you personally, I did not vote for George W. Bush either time I had the opportunity to vote. But something was in the paper this week. It was a quote by him or some speech by him where he said, "We tend to judge other people by their worst examples. We tend to judge other groups by their worst examples and ourselves by our best intentions." I've been carrying that with me all week, and I have to say, amen, George Bush. In other words, I've never said that in my life. But we're here in peace. So I'm going to say, honor him in peace, in the name of peace. But I want to say that until I have some humility about my own brokenness and the brokenness of my tradition and the conflict we've created and the fact that we were silent in the civil rights movement, the fact that we were too late on LGBT, and the fact that we still stumble over ourselves and there's too many white faces in our rooms, the fact that if I can't get to that, then all I'm going to do is stand on some high horse and look at other people and be angry. If I will be confessional, it will do something to dilute my anger.
Just to follow up really quickly, the idea that everybody in our church is in agreement with some of the things that we've done is not the case. We too have done same-sex marriages at Holy Cross. We're one of 7 congregations out of 61 who have gone through the process to move forward with same-sex marriages. That means we've got another 50-some that just said, nah, we really don't want to do that. When we had our first Ramadan dinner, I had one of my members walk up to me after church and say, "Why are you inviting people here who want to kill us?" Yeah. And I said, "That's not who's coming." But that struggle with that anger is internal as well as external. I mean, it's right there in the middle of our own congregations. So we have to wrestle with that as well. That's part of the work that we have to do as a people, as a community.
You can pass it down that way, please. Thank you.
I had to reply to that comment. There are 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. If Islam is all for killing, then either Islam would have ceased to exist or humanity would exist. None of that happened. So 99.99% of Muslims are peace-loving, peace-promoting, law-abiding citizens, of countries all over the world. I also wanted to respond to the civil rights comment. It's really, really, really important to know that, and this is to promote the progressive nature of Islam, that in 1963 when MLK stands outside Lincoln Memorial and says that I dream of a world, where my 4 kids will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. We have to know, and more Muslims, we have to know, because Muslims should be the champions of Black Lives Matters, And that is that 1400 years ago, Prophet Muhammad said that no black is better than white, no white is better than black, no Arab is better than non-Arab, no non-Arab is better than Arab, except what MLK said, the content of the character. It's the piety of your heart that makes you a better person. It's not the color of your skin. So this is really, really important. So as Muslims, and I say that to my fellows at the Islamic Center as well, that we should be out there fighting for the black lives and for standing for discrimination and, on the basis of race and ethnicity.
I'd like to make a comment about one of the things in the Baha'i faith is individual initiative. You got to start with you. If you want to make a change, you have to start it. One of the things that we promote in our youth groups is what is the path, how will you choose to serve? What's your path of service? And everyone has a different part to play, but if that's your part of playing champion civil rights or humanitarian efforts, then you have to get involved. Don't wait for somebody else or some big group to start it. You yourself have to get involved. Another thing I'd like to mention is about the immigration issue. That's something that I can't really speak on a thing about the Baha'i faith, but that's something our family personally has kind of taken up, and because we have people from different countries within our family. So that's something that people have approached us and said, hey, if my kids, if I'm deported, can my kids live with you? And we've already said yes to that, our family. But that's what you have to do. You have to get involved yourself in order to make that change. I also like to mention that when it comes to peace, the Baha'i faith is not organized like most traditional religions. We don't have ministers and priests in our religions. What we have are our organization is set up like on a local level. We have local spiritual assemblies. Whenever there's 9 or more people in a locality, then a local spiritual assembly is elected. We have a national spiritual assembly, and we have a universal house of justice that meets in Haifa, Israel. So when we have issues and problems, we can go to those local spiritual assemblies or national or universal house of justice. Every individual can be a part of that. And if you have Baha'is as well as non-Baha'is, can consult with those bodies on a local, national, and international level. We also have our Universal House of Justice many years ago issued a letter called the Peace Letter. And it's on the internet. If you just Google Baha'i Peace Letter, it'll come up. And it gives you a framework of peace and how we can establish peace throughout the world.
I'll take it from a social justice issue or perspective, and that is, as a boy, I used to think when I saw someone who was suffering or struggling or maybe economically poor or bad health, whatever it may be, I always thought, oh, we the people, we're there to handle that, take care of it, and get them to go forward. And as an adult, as I've gotten to actually advocate for people, my belief is we don't do enough. And it's a disbelief, or for a long time as an adult, I felt like, somebody's got to be doing something about that. So it just made me feel good. But I know from advocating for people that they've got to scratch and crawl and scratch and go and like prove their point, prove themselves, sometimes get laughed at. it's just ridiculous. And so I've been thinking about this for quite some time. And one of the things is that we're a society that is so quick to punish, but yet so slow to reward. And we need to reverse that. So a proposal that I'm proposing is that, for example, right now, we the people could put in, and I know this would need to be debated and discussed, and I understand it's very, it has a lot to go through before it could even happen. But for example, right now we have a drug problem, right? So we have a drug problem. That drug problem, a lot of the reason that we have that drug problem is because people cannot make a living, okay? So they make a living selling drugs, okay? Then we also have a violence problem, and a lot of that stems from the drugs, okay? Somebody didn't give them the money that they wanted, and somebody pulled out the gun and shot somebody. Then we also have, in health, we have people who, for whatever reason, although they're receiving treatment, or maybe they're not even receiving treatment, their health is keeping them from progressing or economic mobility. And then we have unemployment, where people are still under the poverty level. So those are just 4 different populations, and then not to mention mental health, which is part of health. Okay, so if we had a poverty income level, and for those people that aren't doing violence, that aren't doing drugs, okay, and they meet a specific criteria, well, to reward them, we would be able to give them income to be above that poverty level. Now, of course, people would then need to go into some programs, some initiatives, whatever it may be, to hopefully get them to get better, right? Learn, always learning to get better. And so that would have to be in place. And by doing that, just think of all the cost savings we have as far as your money is not going towards building more prisons. It's not going towards more drug centers. It's also making you feel good in the sense that these people didn't ask to have bad health. It just happened. And yet they're economically poor because they can't go and get employment. And I just think that's the type of suffering that we today could alleviate if we had the right capital flow and capital distribution to create that economic mobility. And that's the kind of rewarding that we need to do, because as we do that, then all those other costs that we are going into and investing into to house punishment goes away. And then of course some people will, for whatever reason, will do drugs or will do violence. And of course we want to step in and try to prevent that from happening. But even if it does happen, obviously we have a process or some procedures in place to make that happen. So that's just an overview. And I know there's a lot of issues there. And I do believe, though, that that would not take away from people's incentive to thrive. People want to live above the poverty level. I actually think it would actually take a lot of the expense away and put it towards good use so that people could actually thrive forward and actually gain economic mobility, therefore serving other people as well, because their tax dollars are not going towards those negative expenditures.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more. Right here.
Excuse me, at the risk of being stoned, but I mean physically stoned.
Drugs.
I don't know her either.
Before I get into that, I would like to say this, that as someone mentioned, you're speaking to the choir. We're speaking to the choir. We all seem to be basically on the same wavelength. But I'm reminded of how I was raised. I can remember that far back. One little ditty my mother gave me or taught me It's just human nature, so why should I hate you for being as human as I? I'm just saying. And God forbid I should talk about something else. The other was, if I ever saw someone, no matter what the situation was, is there but for the grace of God go I. Now, where's my question? We're starting at the top. We should be thinking about where we came from, where the future's coming from, and that's our children. We should be concentrating on seeing that as many children as we can come in contact with, as many children as we can influence, we should be training them to think justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with their God, and to be considerate. South Pacific, if anyone knows the musical.
Faith, question. I can say because you're my faith question. Weird.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to emphasize, that you've got to be taught before it's too late.
Question, faith, question.
Teach the children. Yep. All right, here's what, you'll be sorry. Here's the question. There was no religion. Well, after the term religion came from the Italian. There was no religion before the Sermon on the Mount, before the Ten Commandments. There was idol worship, there was all kinds of things. I have to set the stage, and please forgive me. There was no religion. As a result of whatever happened with the Israelites and eventually Jesus and Islam.
Brian, trust me on this one. Take credit. Trust me.
What?
8:18.
Grab. It's now 8:18. I know by 8:20 you said that we have to be out, right?
Here's the question. What would it accomplish if we did not have individual churches and faith where everybody, we are all coming from the same belief. All the religions are good. They're sound. What would happen if you all got together and said, why don't we act from the same page? Why don't we
John Lennon. Imagine. Wouldn't that be a wonderful world?
That's an interesting question. I think it's a nice question to end on, because the thing that has been very inspiring to me is the commonality. However, each of the comments were formed by and rooted in particular traditions. So it's the resources that come from all the various churches and traditions and ethical systems that form individuals who are ready to have that kind of justice-seeking interactions. And, I think if we can turn our focus from the ways in which these things divide us to the ways in which these things teach us how to be together, that's really the very powerful thing. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming, and I feel like we're really getting into some interesting issues, and I want to again express gratitude to the Atlantic Institute and to Unity Church for putting on this particular conversation and for all of their other programs. I want to encourage you to look at the literature that's in the back that talks about the things that are also coming along on the schedule. It seems to me that in decades in the past, in a place like Greenville, sitting in a room like this, many of us could talk about these issues in an academic or abstract sense. Things that we see on the news, things that were happening in other parts of the world that we could be sort of, casual about. And given the nature of the world and the issues that we face, these are things that are not happening around the world, but are also happening on Main Street in Greenville, and are happening in northern Greenville County, and happening all around us. And so I hope that as we think about these issues, we realize, no, if we want there to be peace, there must be justice. And if there is to be justice, we are the ones who have to do it. And we have to do it right here in this place. And that, if we are fortunate, and if we are blessed by God, will flower around the world. And so I want to thank all of our panelists for witnessing to that inherent truth and for joining us this evening. And I want to thank all of you for coming and for being partners and brothers and sisters in this larger task. So thank you so much for being here.